So Ronan, what are some of the central bank trends that you're seeing here now in 2016?
That's a really good question, and it's, I think, critical to the gold market between now and 2020, because I actually think that if there is a reset of the international monetary system, 2020 seems to be one of the dates that it could happen on. For example, everyone is aware that Germany, the Bundesbank, Deutsche Bundesbank, has been repatriating some of its gold from both Paris and from New York. And this particular repatriation exercise started in 2013 and is ending in 2020. And I think it's interesting that they say 2020. So that could be a very subtle symbol of the fact that something is going to happen in 2020. But getting back to the actual repatriation, central banks, by their very nature, are very secretive, and it's not really clear-cut as to whether any of these statements that are coming from central banks are actually true, because there's no independent verification or independent audits. If the Bundesbank says we repatriated 100 tons from New York last year and 85 tons from Banque de France from Paris, okay, they say that, but there's no independent proof that that happened. They're not publishing proper industry standard weight lists, bar lists. It's very difficult to know whether any of these central banks are telling the truth. And central banks in general have been proven not to tell the truth, because really they're in the business of protecting their national sovereign fiat currency, and they will do anything to protect that. One of the things being that they're not honest about their gold holdings. I know for a fact from looking at central bank archives from the Bank of England from the early 1980s that the G10 central banks were discussing a new gold pool in the early 1980s. And the reason that it sounds like a long time ago, but they have a 30-year rule on looking at archives. So right now we can only look at stuff that happened in the 1980s. If you gave me access to look at more recent archives, I guarantee you I could find you some information that would suggest that there is manipulation or talk of gold price manipulation happening more recently than the 1980s. The very fact that this 30-year rule, or in some cases a 25-year rule, exists is completely ridiculous. That a central bank, which is meant to be working for usually the Ministry of Finance of each country, which is part of the government of each country, which represents the people of that country, the people of each country cannot get access to discussions that happened 30 years ago. That is crazy.
You did a fantastic study about the amount of gold left in the London vaults. Could you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, that again I think is another key trend that's going to be important to look at during 2016 and the next few years. The study that I did of the amount of gold in the London bullion market came out of other research that I was doing about the Swiss refineries. So in the summer of 2015, when Indian company Rajesh Exports acquired Swiss refiner Valcambi, it got me thinking about, so what about the possibility of any of the other 3 Swiss refineries getting taken over, because it might start a new acquisition trend. So I looked at Metalor, Arger Heraeus, which is part ownership of the German refiner Heraeus, and also MKS PAMP. So along with Valcambi, they are the 4 big refiners. So I started looking at how much capacity do these refiners have, and how much were they actually refining. And the figures, the data I was working with was the most recently available data in 2013, because there is a lag between when this data becomes available. So in 2013, as a lot of people will be aware, the gold price was smashed down in April and subsequently went lower. But at the same time, the refining output of these 4 huge refineries in Switzerland was very high during 2013. And because mine supply plus recycling is only about 3,000 tons per year, when I was doing my research, I realized that the LBMA had maybe inadvertently publicized the fact that the that the refineries on their list, which is about like 95% of all the refineries in the world, had refined over 6,000 tons of gold that year. And I thought, hold on a second, that's very strange. Where did this excess 3,000 tons come from? And it turns out that the gold that was flowing into these refineries, above and beyond what came from mines and what came from scrap, was about 3,000 tons. So I was thinking, where has this come from? And if you trace back through the Swiss trade statistics, which are actually very transparent for the last few years, you see that one of the major suppliers of gold into Switzerland is coming from the UK. Now, the UK doesn't have any gold mines, and it never did. So the only reason that gold is coming out of the UK meant that gold was flowing into the UK or else was residing in the UK. And when I say UK, I really mean London. So there's the vaults of the LBMA system in London, which would be the Bank of England and a few of the bullion banks, JP Morgan, HSBC, and ETF Gold, etc. So a lot of people listening will be able to remember reading an article about the HSBC vault or the JP Morgan vault. So really, that's what I'm talking about. It always appeared to me odd that whereas the COMEX approved vaults in New York, everybody knows where they are. So you got Scotia near JFK Airport, you got Brinks in Midtown Manhattan and in Queens, you got JP Morgan downtown, you got HSBC Vault Midtown. So people know where they are, and no one makes a big deal of it. And it's actually even printed on the CME website and the CFTC website. But if you compare that to London, the LBMA are very secretive about these vaults. You go onto the website, you click a page, and it says, okay, there's a Bank of England vault, and everybody knows where that is. It's near Bank Tube Station, and it's underneath the Bank of England. But all of the commercial vaults, the addresses listed on the vault page are only the head office addresses of these particular banks. So it says HSBC, Canary Wharf, JP Morgan, London Wall, for example. And it struck me as really strange. Like, these are the head offices, and these buildings were only built really recently, and there's obviously no vaults there. So where are the vaults? And it became like a challenge to me to look for these particular vaults. And I actually said to some friends that it was more challenging than doing a Sudoku puzzle, because anyone could do a Sudoku puzzle, but it's quite difficult to find the vaults, and I want to find the vaults. And as I found each one, it became a challenge to find the others. So I think I know where all of them are, and some of them have now gone into the public domain. For example, JP Morgan, G4S, and Malcolm Mitt. But I think the big one, the big kahuna, is the HSBC vault, and I think I know where that is. It's the one that was profiled by Bob Pisani and CNBC back in 2011, where he goes, this is it, folks, this is the mother lode, and we've been blindfolded, and we're going to go in this car, we don't know where we're going, and then suddenly he was in this vault. So I think I know where this is, and at some stage in the future, I hope to reveal that.
So how much gold do you think is actually left in these vaults?
Well, that's an interesting question, and it's only ever going to be a broad figure, because sometimes the LBMA on their website, they have a page about vaulting. And for example, a few years ago it said there were 9,000 tons of gold in the London system, and then it went down to I think 7,500, and now it's down to 6,000. So myself and a few different gold researchers, including Koos Janssen and Nick Lard, who's the data expert in Australia, and also Bron Sakechi, whose day job is in the Perth Mint, but he also has a personal interest in researching gold, and he has two blogs. One is official for the Perth Mint, and one is unofficial, Gold Chat, Bron Gold Chat. So the four of us got together and started thinking about, like, so how much gold is in this particular system? Nick was interested in it from the point of view of his data about gold going in and out of Switzerland into China, into Hong Kong, India. Hughes Janssen was interested again from that angle, like especially China, because he's the expert. How much gold is going to China? Braun was just interested in it because he likes to look at the big picture, and he probably knows quite a lot of information from his job, and he's very discreet. He wouldn't tell anything that would be commercially sensitive about the Perth Mint, but he also would just be interested in how much gold is in the London system. So we started thinking about, so if there's a certain amount of gold in the London system and a percentage of it, for example, 2/3 is in the Bank of England, then that implies that only 1/3 is available, is representing the rest of the vaults. And everybody knows that the big gold physically backed ETFs like the GLD and the BlackRock iShares gold ETF, they hold their gold in London. So if you think about, okay, there's a certain amount in the Bank of England, a certain amount not in the Bank of England. So of the amount not in the Bank of England, how much of it is represented by ETFs? And it turned out that nearly all of it was represented by ETFs, which means that there wasn't a lot of what Nick Lard labelled a float. There was a very small float existing above and beyond what central banks hold in the Bank of England and what some of the bullion banks hold in the Bank of England, and then the ETF holdings in the commercial vaults. So really, it was a good way, it was an exercise, but it was a good exercise in sort of reverse engineering the figures with the limited amount of information that we could get in the public domain.
So Ronan, in your opinion, what is China's gold strategy?
Well, that's a very interesting question, and it's probably one of the key questions for the gold market this year and going forward over the next 2-3 years. I think it's a two-pronged strategy. The PBOC, People's Bank of China, have a specific strategy of accumulating gold for their own official reserves, a lot of which has probably already been accumulated but hasn't been released as official holdings. So I believe that the PBOC is using either accumulating gold and not revealing it, or else using other entities in the sphere of the official Chinese financial system, such as the safe foreign exchange body, or else even using some of the commercial banks. Because the commercial banks, it's important to remember, like ICBC, China Construction Bank, Bank of China, even though they have been floated on the stock market in both Shanghai and in Hong Kong, they're still state controlled. So even though there's a free float of shares, a lot of the majority of the voting control is still the Chinese state. So some of these banks could be being used to accumulate gold that at a point in the future, gold that is accounted for as being part of these commercial banks could easily flow into official holdings. So that's one prong of the Chinese gold strategy, the official gold holdings, which I think are bigger than is being revealed currently. So I think the second strand of the official Chinese government gold strategy is putting gold in the hands of the people as an insurance policy, as a store of value. So they've done a number of measures to enable the Chinese population to acquire gold, liberalized the gold market, opened and established the Shanghai Gold Exchange. So the Chinese population in the future, if there is a global currency crisis, will at least have an insurance policy and a store of value in gold.
So Ronan, for a new investor looking to store their gold, what are some important elements that they should look out for?
Well, the key elements for an investor looking to store gold would be auditing, how the auditing is set up and operated, whether the gold is allocated and segregated. And it's important to realize the difference between pool allocated and actually allocated and segregated. So with BullionStar, for example, every piece of material, bullion, coins and bars that is purchased and stored with BullionStar in its vault in the BullionStar premises is segregated down to an individual bar. So the bar that you buy is the bar that you own, and it's the same bar that you can go to the BullionStar shop and withdraw if need be, and you'll get that actual bar.
Ronan, tell us a bit more about what you're working on at the moment.
Okay, for the last couple of months, I've been exclusively doing research into a new concept that's going to appear in BullionStar research very soon, and it's called the Gold University. And the Gold University, the concept is to create factual knowledge about things such as gold markets, gold vaults, refineries, taxation issues in gold. And it's really a repository like a Wikipedia, for which the general public and financial media, journalists can go to as a source of reference to look up up-to-date information about things such as gold markets around the world. So the first major release in the Gold University is going to be around 20 different gold markets from around the world. So looking at the globe, you're going to have US, New York gold market, London, Germany, Switzerland, Dubai, Istanbul, then into India, Singapore, all the areas of Southeast Asia, Malaysia, Indonesia, and across to Vietnam, Korea, Hong Kong, China, and Japan. So for some markets that have organized exchanges, such as Tokum in Japan or the Shanghai Gold Exchange in China, the information will refer to these particular either spot exchanges or futures exchanges, talk about some of the contracts. And in markets where there is an organized exchange, some of the other information about the markets will touch on refineries and some of the major players and how the system works in that market. Now, some countries have a very extensive gold market, but they don't have a centrally organized venue. For example, Germany. So Germany is a really important country as a gold market, but a lot of people wouldn't realize how it's set up and structured. And the way Germany is set up, like a few other countries, is that the bullion banks and the commercial banks are very much involved in that market, but it's decentralized. So you have a set of major players and a set of maybe less important players. So you have the refineries, wholesalers, the commercial banks, the Landesbanks, Reichsbank Bank, Commerzbank, and then you have the some of the distributors, which some quite large, which people have never heard the names of. Then you have some of the big refineries, and even though we've organized it on a geographical basis, sometimes there's quite a lot of overlap. And Germany is a good example because other German-speaking countries such as Switzerland and Austria are very much overlapped with Germany. So some of the German distributors have branch offices in Austria and Switzerland, and vice versa. Some of the Swiss companies and Austrian companies have branches in Germany. So it's not cut and dried as regards markets, but we thought that it was the best way to organize it along a geographical lines, because people are familiar with the concept of national markets.